Hi, you're listening to Young Leaders Podcast, a show that inspires creatives and motivates you to make a meaningful impact in the world. My name is Filippo Bagarella, and this is Jeremy Duckett.
Hi, guys.
We will be your guide to success as we interview young leaders, selfishly asking them about their progress and the lessons in life they've learned so far. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Calista Richlen.
Thank you. Happy
Hey,
to
girl, we
be
finally
here.
made it. All right. Okay, so first question we ask everybody is, what is your definition of a leader?
Someone who is able to guide a person or a group of people to a goal, whether that be like a common goal amongst the group, or just being able to guide somebody to their next stage in life. So leading them to the next stage, whether that be one person, a group of people, anything like that.
So, do you think that could also be explained as a servant in a way that helps you to get to the next
A
level?
leader, in a way, they are in a position of power, but they should use that power to serve. So, yes. And in a like almost like a paradox kind of way. You're leading, you're in a position of power, but you're doing it to serve those around you. Absolutely.
Okay. So, you are a musician. You
I play the flute.
play the flute. Tell me how you encountered this instrument for the first time in your life.
Oh, let's see. When I was young, I was not exposed to classical music. So I didn't actually have my first exposure to any sort of classical instrument, pretty much things outside of like commonly used pop instruments in the early 2000s. I didn't have my first exposure to it until I was in like fifth grade or middle school. When I was in fifth grade, I remember we did like a field trip to the Nashville Symphony, and that was the first time that I had seen an orchestra. And that was the first time that I had seen all of these new instruments. And then when I was in middle school, that's when I first picked up the flute.
So, you said you refer to the flute as a classical instrument, whereas in
Well,
comparison to...
in the sense of like early 2000s, you had your pop instruments and then you had your non-pop instruments. And so I at the time would categorize flute as a classical instrument, yes.
Are you more inclined, were you or are you more inclined to a specific type of music, that like pop music instead of classical music,
Oh,
or
yeah, absolutely. I am like I enjoy classical music. Just kind of categorizing, all of the old music into classical music. But I definitely like my heart is with stuff like R&B,
hell yeah.
which like
Yeah,
I
when in the car ride, I remember.
yeah.
You would blast it.
Yeah, I listened to a lot of R&B. Growing up, my dad was an R&B singer, and he was in a R&B group called Colorblind, and they did a lot of tours and like a lot of recordings and stuff. And so I had like a huge exposure to R&B, rap, a lot of like pop that had more of like the R&B influence as opposed to like the very pop like cookie cutter kind of super upbeat
I
sort
love
of thing.
Cookie cutter. I love cookie cutter.
But that was my exposure when I was a kid. And then I listened to a lot of rock as a kid too. So I had like quite a variety, but I didn't really, like I said, I didn't have any exposure to much classical stuff until I was about 11 years old. I was pretty late in the game when I first, like I don't think I actually heard who J.S. Bach was until I was in high school.
Same thing for us.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, at least for me, I learned about Bach when I was in high school. I mean, I knew he existed, but I had no idea about the importance he had in any way, shape, or form. But if I have to think about someone who has some sort of relationship between pop music and old music, classical music, would be Lizzo.
Oh, absolutely.
She showed up, was it the Met Gala? She showed up to the Met Gala and started playing Debussy.
I mean, she's a classically trained flautist at the University of Houston, I believe. I can't remember if she got her degree, but she did do everything that we do. She went through all of that. And like the main thing that separates her from us is her like, I don't want to say her drive because we're all very driven, but it's her grasping this new life. She I think the first thing that she did outside of school, she dropped out of school and then she went and found like a rock band on Craigslist or something. Yeah, she like left school, totally just went out into this whole new genre, this whole new world of music, compared to what we do. We mostly focus on this old stuff. And even though we have these schools and we have these different organizations who really drive us toward doing more contemporary stuff and tackling more pop culture ideas, we're still very like old Eurocentric music. Like that's what we're learned. That's what we learn. That's what we're taught. And so she just went into this whole new world and just ran with it. And then, I mean, I don't think nobody knew that she played flute until after Truth Hurts became super popular, and she just whipped it out one day and was going
Just
nuts.
whipped it out.
Yeah, she just whipped it out one day and just started playing, like, and everybody was just so blown away, and so she just has this drive to do all of the new things and really just drive it home.
But I think that she also embodies like this image of an ambassador saying, listen, I am known for this, but this other thing, it's pretty cool. Classical music. And not most classical musicians, especially at least my generation that has practiced, in orchestras and all that, we just never thought that we would see someone at a Met Gala. Usually Met Gala is for people who are within the pop industry or people who are in the... help me, Jay.
Very high-end famous.
Very high-end famous. In fashion, there I was missing the fashion part. It's the Met Gala. But no one ever connected it to classical music necessarily. Even if there are people who are connected to classical music at the Met Gala, I am sure.
Let alone
And I
Craigslist.
find that
Let alone Craigslist.
I do find that a little funny. I find it a bit amusing.
Why?
Because you have like, I don't remember what year it was, but there was, or what exactly the theme was either, but there was a year with the Met Gala where people were dressing up as like super old stuff. Zendaya was in like that suit of armor.
Yes.
And you have like these themes that are surrounding around like super historical art trends, fashion trends, but there's never anything revolving around the musical trends.
Yes.
The old musical
Actually,
trends.
you're right, because it's vice versa. It's not the trend that follows the music in a way, or the musician. It's the musician with its own ability of creating music that follows a trend. And then his music is then related to that trend.
Yeah, and it all goes hand in hand,
In some way. But I think that if it was vice versa, it would be slightly different. Because it would be more thematic, probably. People like Lizzo did it vice versa. She showed up playing a flute. Now that is a completely different end, but that gives an idea of how it would be different. I think she's the only one. I think it was another person who showed up singing was the guy who sang Gangnam Style.
Oh, yeah.
He just showed up at the Met Gala, just trottling his way through with his song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot about him.
He actually had a speech at Harvard 2 years ago, the year we got here. I think it was 2 years ago. I watched it, and I'm like, I've never heard you speak English. And he actually went to Harvard. This guy went to Harvard.
Huh?
Yes,
I didn't
yes,
know that.
yes.
Human style.
There's a
Yes,
lot
I
of...
think. Or he didn't go to Harvard. I'm sorry. He went to a musical school here. I'm sorry.
Laundry?
No, not to Longy. I think he went to Berkeley. I can actually check that for y'all. But yeah.
But, there's a lot of musicians who have classical training that you wouldn't think of. Like, my favorite one is Jason Derulo. He was opera trained. He sings opera. Jason Derulo, did you know that?
No.
Yeah. I had to look it up, but yeah. I don't remember where I learned that, but I thought it was just so crazy. He is trained to sing opera. I don't know if he has like a degree or anything like that, but he, much like Lizzo, he went through that.
Actually, there are a lot of people who went through an actual upbringing of classical
Oh,
music.
absolutely.
Charlie Puth, he went to
Yeah,
Berkeley.
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
We have, help me out here. Do we know anybody
I
else?
don't know.
I've named, we've got Jason Derulo, we got Lizzo, Shakira also.
Shakira.
She did.
Yeah. Again, I think a lot of musicians, I don't know if I can't think of any off the top of my head who have a degree in anything.
But that's not
or
the
at least
point.
like anything music related. Oh, of course it's not the point. I think that, it's a little bit surprising just because, I feel like a lot of people who do pursue a degree in music, they kind of have this idea just hammered down into their brain that like this education that they're getting in music is going to be one of the few things that'll make them successful in music. This training will make you successful knowing this, that, and the other about whatever classic or whatever time period, classical period, baroque period, like anything like that. That's what's going to make you successful. And I think that looking at all of these very like prolific musicians who like pop musicians like Lizzo, Jason Derulo, Shakira, all these pop musicians who don't like they have some training, they have some formal training, and then you have others who have no formal training, but they are so successful in what they do, and so that like directly goes against the grain of what we've always been told as classically trained musicians who do go through like the higher education pipeline, getting their bachelor's, master's, doctorate, even. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk education for a second. So I understand that yes, some musicians that are now in the pop culture might have a background of musical upbringing, of classical musical upbringing, especially in Boston with or at Juilliard. But I think that it's not always 100% necessary to know as much. That's why most of them drop off or don't finish. How important do you think it is, though, in general, not only just in music, to finish education? If you think about the most like notorious people, Mark Zuckerberg, for example, he's an example that comes in my head because he went to Harvard and he dropped off.
I I think education's important, and like as a person, like just pursuing education just as an individual makes you a more well-rounded person, and it allows you to make more informed decisions, having more informed conversations, and I think it just allows you to have in a way, a better quality of life. But, taking education as an approach like for a career path, there's, if we'll go with the musician life as a flute player, there's 1,000 of us every square foot, like there's so many flute players in the world, and there's so many who can play phenomenal music. They have phenomenal tone, phenomenal technique, and a lot of them have degrees. A lot of them have bachelor, master's degrees. And so, in that sense, it is a great career choice for me to pursue like a master's, a DMA, or a PhD, a high level of education. And then, as an approach of society, right, it's so beneficial for society to have a high level of education similar to the individual being able to make informed decisions and having this better quality of life, but also just being able to progress yourself as a person as well as those around you to higher level of thinking and just being able to accomplish more as a whole.
Do you also think that it's? I think it's very important to have education as well, but I feel like a lot of it is connections too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in a way, my master's degree was 90% connections.
Really.
I'm not gonna say where I've gotten my master's degree from, but I feel as though the things that I learned were tremendous. However, most of what I have obtained were connections and wonderful opportunities. Aside from that, I feel like I could have gotten an equal, if not better, education elsewhere.
Fair. So connections is a really important thing. I just want to take a step back when you said there are hundreds and thousands of us. By us, I believe you meant
Flute players.
flutists. That probably creates also a lot of competition, I suppose.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially because in an orchestra, it's not like violins that are, or it's already competitive by itself, but in violins you need like from 8 to 12 violins.
But flutes,
two, three.
Three at the most. I think the largest flute section in any orchestral setting is like 4 or 5, but on average it's 2 or 3.
So that must be extremely stressful.
Well, I've done my due diligence and I've played in orchestras before, and I know that I don't like it. And I think that a big thing for me, the main reason I don't like orchestras is because, well, let me rephrase that. I don't like being an orchestral player.
Yeah.
Is because you are just a machine part. You are not important in any other way. Like, as a flute player, if I was second flute in my local professional orchestra all of my undergrad, and I could have been replaced at any minute by the drop of a hat, a snap of a finger, because there were so many other great flute players who wanted my spot. And that was terrifying for me, knowing that there was no personal connection, there was no musical connection among between me and whomever the higher ups are, conductor, and then of course the administration for the orchestra. There is no connection there, because if I do something wrong, they'll just get another flute player and pay them. And I find, I'm not saying that every orchestra is like that, right? But that is the trend, and I feel like that's not a healthy way to live. And I find that that's also, like, orchestra is I don't want to say it's very cutthroat. I feel like it's gotten better, since we've been in this field, compared to stories that I've heard from my elders. But it still is relatively cutthroat. You play a wrong note, okay. You get one chance. You play it wrong again, bye. Get out of here.
And whereas, where would you see yourself play if not in orchestra?
One thing that I really want to do is I love teaching, and I really want to be a professor. I'm going that route. Like currently I teach a ton and I love it so much. And at that collegiate level, not only are you having the opportunity to do some high level thinking, high level digging, and just really diving into the nitty gritty of flute playing, which is what I love. But also you get, like, because you have you have a title, and I don't want to say it's a prestigious title, depending on, where you're a professor at. But regardless, it saying professor, it
Or
comes
doctor.
with a level, or doctor, having that high level title, it comes with a bit
This
of
academia.
like, exactly, it comes with like a little bit of stank to your name, like it's good, it's
Yeah.
good. And so you get kind of these other opportunities that otherwise you wouldn't get. So being able to, like, fly across the country and teach master classes at other colleges and doing like a little trade-off, or being able to you through that get more connections and be able to perform more and more, which is another thing that I love doing. I absolutely love to perform, mostly as a soloist, but I have really enjoyed doing chamber works, and I have done a lot of pit, and I did enjoy some of the stuff that I did in orchestra. I don't want to go that route with my life,
By pit, explain.
like pit as in like a pit orchestra for like an opera, or for like musical theater. I've really loved being able to do that sort of thing in my time. I've done, I think, 3 operas, and then I did 1 musical theater production, and it was all phenomenal. I loved it so much. It's a different kind of listening and playing and just a different community in those situations.
When did you understand that this ideal of academia and of, the title of being a professor and a teacher or a doctor gives you, gives you this good feeling? When did you realize that?
I have wanted to be a teacher for a long time. Like, since I was a kid.
All right.
Kind of, yeah. But, when I was a kid, I was like, I'm going to teach, like K-12, basically, is kind of the vision that I had. And then once I got to college, I started off as a music education major and realized that the only way I could ever be happy in K-12 teaching is if I was at my, ideal school with ideal students. Ideal meaning you have support from administration and faculty and families, and you have students who want to be in it and aren't forced to be in it, whether that be by parents or through school. And so I stopped and was like, professor sounds that sounds phenomenal, because that seems like the group that I want to teach. And then I did get the opportunity to teach some other collegiate students, and was like, oh, this is amazing. This is just so much fun, being able to do this with such high-level musicians and being able to create and help guide students to such high-level musicianship. I was like, this is phenomenal. And so that's what I'm doing now, except with younger students. My private students are all around my youngest private student is 9, and my oldest one is in her 50s. And so I have a wide range of private students, but they're all phenomenal, and I love working with them so much.
This is a question very similar to the previous one, but it's slightly different and very important, I think. I asked you, when did you realize the importance of academia, about being a professor, and I also believe about learning. I believe in learning from others. But when did you realize that the flute was going to be your companion for life? Or did you actually get to that point? Because some people, my case, I don't see myself, and I think this is very important also for mental health. If you're good at something, such as playing, or you're invested into practicing an instrument and going down this path, doesn't mean that you might also be interested in other paths in the meantime. So how did you deal with the idea that you might end up doing something different one day? Or have you ever thought about that?
For a while, I really heavily considered pursuing vocal studies. Yeah, I've always really loved singing, and so I would do singing and flute playing side by side. I did that for a long time. But while I was in my undergrad, I just, I while I love singing, I have found just it's so much easier for me to be able to create and portray my ideas through flute playing, and I also have a fascination with with vocal stuff. You have language to help you push different emotions, and a lot of it is physicality, but you have something tangible with language. But with instruments that don't utilize words, so with flute playing, you can't talk while producing sound. And with most wind instruments, you can't do that. And so you have this level of abstract thinking and execution. There is not many tangible things. With singing, you have words, you have this physicality. With flute, you don't have that. You have physicality, you don't have words. So everything is produced through it's produced through your vibrato, it's produced through your sound tone and your quality, and how you want to sing through the lines, and then how you're able to sing through the lines using an instrument that you're not singing, right? You're using an instrument. So there's all that, and then also just accepting it as an extension of me. your voice is within you, right? An instrument is an extension of you. And treating it that way, I think, allows it to be more fun for you and for your audience. But as, for you, I know you say that you don't necessarily want to pursue violin anymore. But I guess kind of going back to like the education route, you're younger than us. Me and Jeremy are both master's students. But
No,
how?
he's 21. He's an undergrad.
I thought you were a master's. I thought you were first year master's.
He's actually smaller than I am. He's younger than me.
Is he?
I am.
Yeah.
I thought you were a first year master's.
Oh,
I
I'm
thought
a
that's what
baby.
you told me like forever ago.
Oh, I may have been joking.
Oh,
I may have had the big bushy beard back
you
then.
absolutely had the big bushy beard, and I don't pick up on all your jokes. Sometimes you just say things.
I mean,
so,
when he jokes, he's serious.
no, you
he is
say
a serious
everything
joker.
so like I don't want to say stale, but like it's very. You say
stale.
everything the same
Oh,
way,
no.
so I couldn't.
Oh,
I
no.
couldn't tell it was a joke. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Well, then for both of y'all, you're younger than me. You have. I'm not gonna say you have less experience, but you have less life experience than I
Definitely.
do.
No, you can say that.
So like, how do you guys feel about like the educational routes as well as like your instrument? What do you play, Jeremy?
Piano.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, barely though.
Want to answer the question first?
You go for it.
All right,
I
I'll
know
go
you
first.
want to.
Well, in my case, I think that I realized that the violin, it's not that I don't want to pursue it. I want to pursue it on a different level. So, being what I'm doing now, one would expect, he's doing his master, he's undergrad, he's going to do his bachelor's and then continue with his master's or PhD, right? And I, little parentheses, I like the academia ideal. I do. But I don't think I can pursue it through violin because it's not my way of expressing myself anymore. And that's why I changed department into the composition department, which is not where I want to get to yet, but it's a step forward, or better, a step further from where I was before and my discontent that I had previously. So what I see myself doing is mostly teaching probably history or something still musically related, but that doesn't have to necessarily comprehend the idea of playing an instrument, because I personally, I don't know about y'all, but in my case, I can't anymore practice as long as I used to do in the past, because mentally it's just very draining, and I don't think it's mentally sane to practice 4 to 8 hours a day, then go to a class and then have a person tell you it's not enough. And this is something I realized way before the US, is that it's never going to be enough. And I kind of forgot that musical liberty that I used to have. I lost it. And I kind of refound it in a different form, shape, if I can explain it that way. So it's a work in progress. Maybe next year I'm going to end up playing the violin again. Who knows?
No, absolutely. I find that I had a similar thing when I was in my undergrad. I was just like so burnt out from my instrument, just like you said. And for me, what reignited the spark that I had was pursuing performance instead of pursuing music education. But, there has to be like some sort of level of like, we can be very toxic to ourselves and saying that no matter what I do, it's never going to be enough. But there has to be a level of kindness to ourselves to go along with that, just because, like, at the end of the day, we're human first, and we're people first, and then we are musicians second. No matter what, like, while we define ourselves as musicians, we're always going to be a person before that, which means we have to be able to take care of ourselves. And so, with that saying, I was practicing for I was practicing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? Like you're practicing just nonstop and you have these people nagging you saying that it's not good enough. It's not a matter of like what they think is good enough. It's a matter of what you think is good enough. And you can be happy with the product that you create for now and allow that to be your base and grow upon that later.
Wow.
What? Did I just speak?
I just
just
found my
ramble
next.
for
I found my next shrink.
Wow.
I did. We need to sit down once. Actually, you are gonna. Why don't you sit with us in the podcast once a week? We just
Sure.
speak our hearts out.
No, I'm so down to do that. I have a lot to say. I like to ramble. So if you ever want me back, just let me know.
That was inspirational.
That was some inspirational shit right there. You whipped it out.
You're going back to being a violin major now, right?
You're all welcome.
I don't know if that's a good thing, but no, yeah, definitely. I think that it's important. It's important to keep your mind open.
Gotta have a balance.
Gotta have
Yes,
balance.
absolutely.
Balance.
You have to be able to balance.
I mean, I caught myself not practicing for like 2 weeks, for example, and then found myself having to play yesterday my chamber recital. Fun fact about chamber recital. Jeremy's pants. Little story about Jeremy's pants and his black pants for the concert. I'll explain to you why they're correlated.
I am
all right?
thrilled.
So I have concert pants. I do, but they ripped. Okay? And I am too broke to buy new concert pants. Or better, I always forget, and by the time I remember, I'm broke. So I always asked Jeremy to like to kindly let me his black pants, which fit me really well. They're very comfortable, and it worked ever since. So I never like bought, I guess, new black pants.
Never did. You always keep asking.
Fun fact though, yesterday I showed up at the concert with these green like shocking glowing pants, like sweatpants pants.
Oh
And
my God.
but I had like my formal jacket and a black shirt and like black shoes, concert shoes. So you see this like green pants out of nowhere, and all you could see like in the distance is like these two legs moving while I'm playing the violin. And with the lights, it was even worse because the light just reflected on these green like shocking green pants.
Oh my
Are they
God.
like fluorescent?
Not fluorescent, but they were like, I think you saw them.
Were they like the...
Dog, you just had green fluorescent
That-
pants on?
Because I'm gonna explain why. They're like the lightest pants I had for
Lime
that
green.
day. Yeah, lime green.
Lime green.
It was funny because at that point I was like, I it's not fair to get him like to get up and bring me the other pants. Like it's literally a recital where nobody ever goes to anyways. There were like 4 people
No
that day.
offense. Yeah.
No offense at all, but no one shows up.
Yeah.
So I was like, let's just try this. So I put this pearl necklace at the same time, and actually, like, it was a style. It was.
I would
a
love
style.
to see it.
You want,
I would love
I'm
to
gonna
see
show you the
it.
picture.
Please
later.
do.
What was your question?
So, talking about like how you guys feel as younger folk than I,
Oh.
about like the idea of higher education, academia, or your instrument.
For my instrument. Yeah, no. I much different take than Filippo's. I'm still kind of struggling to figure out what I want to do, but I know I want to do something in the arts, specifically in like media and movies, games,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And for me, music is a facet to get into that.
No, absolutely.
But yeah, I really relate to the like what you were saying about these musicians who like have no prior knowledge to anything, like any music theory, notation, anything. Because like in my hometown, we had like a population of like 2,000 people. So I mean, the only thing we had was this little store called a Spots music store, and you had like 5 super specific instruments because it's like the only people around who could play those instruments. But other than that, yeah, there's no formal training. I came from a normal high school, normal high school. Um, and so yeah, I think it depends on what you want to do. If you want to become a professor, if you want to go into academia, yeah, of course, I do think it's necessary. You do have to have that knowledge in order to teach it. So, but if you just want to get yourself out there, you want to do your own stuff, produce music for videos, movies, you know, you just do it.
He's a composer.
I mean, using music as a voice is absolutely, I mean, that's what all of us are doing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we all found our voice amongst whatever it is we chose to do.
Yeah. So, I guess to answer your question, I think it depends. It depends if if you want to go into education, you do need education.
Yeah, absolutely.
But to be an artist, I mean, I think it was the Beatles that couldn't read music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many.
I think so. Not everybody in the Beatles knew how to read or notate music.
I mean, do you think it's helpful?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So helpful but not necessary?
Yeah, I think it's very like dependent on the situation, I guess. So, I don't know. I think in some cases you definitely need theory. Yeah, but others, I don't know. It just depends on your situation. I think it's very situational.
Mm-hmm.
As a composer, do you find it necessary to know theory?
No.
Or do you just hear it and you just write things down?
Me personally, I just like I grew up listening to like I was a big nerd when it came to like film scores. So I always use that as like a standard. So I'm super like minimalistic, I fuck with a lot of the half notes and whole notes and stuff like that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, really, you just gotta use your ears. As a composer, I think you just use your ears to kind of filter the good and the bad. If it sounds bad, don't do it. If it sounds good, you really like it, keep it in. It's as simple as that. It's very, that's my music theory.
When I first met Jay, I think it was the first week, we left Boston and we went somewhere else. And I remember he showed me his repertoire of music he had in his computer till that point, and it was what he used to audition for his university. And I remember that it was music with it really touched me in a way that I wasn't really touched by other compositions, songs, whatever you want to call them, in that same way. I was touched in different ways, but this type of feeling I had with his type of music was special. So what I want to get to is how he said it. Yes, I agree. Maybe academia is the way to go if you want to teach, but if you want to also touch people's hearts, you can do it with way less knowledge and way less of anything, because at the end of the day, it's an exchange of feelings, and on that level,
I think it's what touches you.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you put out what you've got, and then the people that can relate to it.
Yeah.
And I think that if it regards an exchange, an literal exchange of feelings, or of a mood, it doesn't have to have technical meaning behind it. Now, it can have, and that might be a good thing, might be a thing that doesn't really matter. That really depends. But yeah, if I want to touch someone's heart, I can do it also without the necessary requirements of an actual student would have in a conservatory, for example.
Do you think that there is a correlation between your ability to like truly utilize and execute these ideas on your instrument and like formal education. So, like, do you think that you being able to play your instrument well, do you think that comes from education, or do you think that comes from just personal work?
In my case, at least, it comes from my ability of understanding the instrument by myself. So even before the violin, I played a little bit, I think, the guitar. A local guitar player from, I think it was in Macedonia. I was living there back then. He gave me this little electric guitar, and I would just go for it, you know. And I didn't have technique, I didn't have anything, but I always managed to find little like themes or things I use using my ear. So to answer your question, yes, I think that it comes from within rather than from a technique that someone teaches you. The technique helps you stay on board and helps you achieve goals that you probably wouldn't be able to achieve if you didn't learn it. But the good ability of playing the instrument comes from within, definitely.
What do you think?
I think through education we learn multiple ways to be able to execute different ideas, characters, and concepts. So, like, education, you know, we learn how to better execute our instrument, you know, and in order to fully use the instrument to kind of project our voice, I think that there has to be some sort of instruction involved. Because, like, for me, if I didn't go to school for music, um, I think that I'd still be a decent flute player, but I would not be able to I don't think I'd be able to properly move people the way that I do now, and I don't think I'd be able to properly challenge people the way that I do now. Not challenge in the sense of like, I'm better than you, but challenge in the sense of like, you leave a performance that I do with something new, whether that be like a question, a new idea, like a new definition of something. Like you have something new to take away with you. And I don't think I would have been able to do that without formal education. Because while I had ideas of what I wanted to execute, I didn't know how to execute those ideas. And, you know, part of that was the instrument that I had, but a lot of that was just not knowing where to begin.
Question to you. How did you, because I think it connects pretty well to what she's saying, how did you actually learn how to play the piano and how you're still working on it, learning songs and things?
Yeah.
Explain us your procedure.
Oh, yeah. Well, I would just go on YouTube. I would just look up my favorite songs from films, games, have it as you will. And I would look up piano tutorial, and I would skip past all the notation stuff, and I would go to these videos that look like Guitar Hero, kind of, but it was for the piano. You see the piano notes come down.
Like the long bars, yeah.
And that's how I learned. I would just copy that. I would memorize. Honestly, like as they would come, I'd like anticipate it, literally just like Guitar Hero, but for piano. But coming to school, I realized like doing that, I developed like performance techniques and stuff, like just because I wanted it to sound like the music itself, but I couldn't read music, you know. So I don't know. I think I think you tend to just play. I don't know. You like it. I feel like when you just play to play, not when you read music. When you just play, it comes from you, like genuinely, and obviously you. I don't know.
It comes from within.
Yeah,
that's what I was saying.
It comes from within, exactly. And yeah, the way I learned piano was strictly from that. I like it was stupid of me to do that.
No, actually, fun fact, it's not stupid at all because a couple people before you, I interviewed this amazing pianist called Richard Bortolan. He has been a very close friend of mine. We've been in high school together for 5 years, but prior to that, we sang in a choir for a long time. And when I asked him, "What's your what was the way you approached the piano for the first time?" Now, keep in mind, he is a national, if not worldwide, piano winner of competitions. And he said exactly what Jeremy said. Back then, these type of videos were not still a thing as much as it is now. But I remember he used to tell us he would have the piano in one room and the computer in the other room. And he would look at the video of the person playing the piano in slow motion or through these little explanation videos with the like you explained it, and then he would rush to try to remember it and then rush to the other room and then replicate it. Now it's fair because after that he continued in academia and now he's an amazing pianist, but it's not stupid.
I mean, no, I mean when it comes to, I think, anything in the arts, whether that be music, any sort of like physical art, dance, stuff like that, it starts from within, right? We have, like, everybody starts somewhere. But just to kind of play devil's advocate, I mean, even watching those videos, most of the people who post those videos are trained in some way. And so you are learning from people, whether you intend, like you're doing intentionally or not, you are learning from another person, right? So, and I mean, that's very similar to like the Suzuki method. There is no notation. It is strictly replicating what you see and what you hear. There's no notation involved. It's just sight and
Colors, a lot of colors. In my case, Suzuki method was with
exactly.
colors.
So it's all here, and it eventually makes its way to here, but it's all here. And those videos have been around for a long time because I learned piano the same way when I was young.
There you go.
I'm not a pianist by any means. I've lost most of my skills. But when I was in like middle school, high school, and then like pre-COVID college, I was a pretty decent pianist. And I only learned until I got to college, I only learned from watching somebody else play. And same with guitar. I only would watch people play.
Guitar also. I really want to learn the guitar, but...
Oh, you can do it.
You think so?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They tried, my cousin back in Italy tried teaching me, but at the end she's like, nah, I'm sorry. No.
I teach
Stick to the
4-year-olds
violin.
how to play ukulele. I could teach you how to play guitar.
Guys, I'm open arms here. Like,
Yeah.
I really want to. I'm just very...
Just let me know.
I mean, do you get calluses when you like play the violin?
I used to have terrible calluses. Like, I remember I used to scratch myself with the calluses and not with the nails. From how... No, it
Felt that. Felt that.
yeah. It's serious. Okay, that's very disgusting, but
yeah, no, absolutely.
But this is how bad it was. And I remember not only, but my left pinky was like, just like I had muscle here. I had muscle. Because my professor would teach me like trills, and trills require like a lot of steady rhythms and da 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 da. And I would like hours. And after like a month or two of doing it, I had this huge like hand and that's normal hand next to it. So it was like,
Sorry.
it's fine. Was that a hiccup?
Yeah, my partner says I sound like one of those rubber chickens.
I thought that was the
He
mic.
said that to me yesterday. No, that was my body. That's
impressive.
Guinness World Record.
That's what this podcast is for. To embarrass
Chickens.
people.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't want to embarrass you.
No, it's okay. I do it all the time.
It's cute. It's cute. Okay, it's cute. I think it's cute.
It's quirky.
It's quirky. This is staying. This is staying. Okay, listen. We had a long day. Okay, okay, under the sun. So, under the sun. Look at him. I mean, he's burnt. You burnt. We burnt. I mean, I'm not.
We're burnt.
I'm not yet. It takes for me. It takes a little longer to get burned, but I do. I swear.
I get one good burn and I'm set.
You're sick.
I tan after that.
I'm telling you, I get headaches. I don't get sunburnt. I get headaches like real bad.
Oh wow.
Under the sun.
I mean, that's valid. That makes sense.
Thank you.
Dehydration, right?
So, flutist, flautist. So it's flautist.
Is it flautist?
So flautist is the European term. Flutist is the American term.
Nice.
That's like the only difference.
Gotcha. As a flutist. I'm sorry.
Flautist.
Flautist.
I
You
like
say flautist, I say flutist.
Yes.
I like flautist because it sounds nicer than flutist. Or I either say flautist or flute player. One of the two.
As a flautist.
It's a flautist. Flow, is the European way, British way.
That?
Flautist.
Flautist, yeah.
Is that flautist? Is it the European way? By European you mean European English.
Yeah.
So British.
British, yeah.
Flautist.
But I think also like
Flautist. I scared you. No, I'm just thinking a British person. How would he say flautist? Flautist or flautist? Flautist. Flautist. Flautist.
Flautist.
Flautist.
Flautist.
Fucking flautist.
You gotta cut this out. we can't have this kind of.
Okay. What kind of repertoire do you like to play?
Oh, I love contemporary stuff.
Oh yeah, you
Yeah,
said that.
I've played some of my stuff for you.
Huh?
I really love contemporary music. I mean, honestly, I love most eras. I think have a really cool quality. You know, something to latch onto. Like the Baroque period is there's so many rules, and I think it's really interesting. Like the mastery it requires to play a work with like just so elegantly. Like it takes so much knowledge to be able to execute it properly. And then the classical period, there's really honestly not as much rep in the classical period for flutes.
Really?
Because that's like when clarinet became popular, so everybody was writing for clarinet. That's when clarinet came into play. Yeah, so all the cool stuff is for clarinet. Now, granted, there's some cool flute stuff, but it's just not.
Very few.
But the Romantic era, similar. It's like there's not as much rep. Maybe it was the Romantic era that was the clarinet one. I don't remember entirely. But Romantic
close.
period, like it's just gorgeous, beautiful, like feel good kind of music, you know.
Oh yeah.
But the contemporary period, I really love like weird music. Because it kind of like it challenges our idea of what music is. And not just that, but like it requires a different type of focus and a different type of playing. Like you can play every single scale you can think of every single day for the rest of your life. All your arpeggios, scales and thirds, scales and fourths, all that. And you can execute like most rep. You couldn't touch contemporary music. You know, like it just doesn't follow the same guidelines as anything else that we've seen before it. And so it requires a new type of mastery that we don't see anywhere else.
I love her answers. They're just so academic.
Academic.
Academic. Academic. Academic.
I just think this stuff is neat.
That's
You
very
know?
well said. She's actually good.
Oh.
I just like to talk. That's about it.
Talk to me about your instrument for a second. History-wise, the instrument as a flute, what was it born as an ensemble instrument or as, or as a solo instrument?
From what I understand, it was used. Okay, so I've honestly gotten some conflicting information, so I'm still trying to figure out what's what. So, in some ways, it was used to accompany the voice specifically, and then in some ways, it was a standalone instrument. So, really, it was born as both, to my understanding. I could be totally wrong.
Okay.
But as it grew, it did, it obviously it is its own instrument now. It's used in, it's used in ensembles. It's used as a solo instrument. So I can't give you a good answer. I can't give you a solid answer.
You said that it was born to either imitate the voice also, right? Or accompany the voice. Sorry, you said accompany the voice. And it's very similar because violin was born to imitate the voice, a stringed instrument. So I think that is very interesting. Most instruments come as an accompaniment or a commodity to something that is very natural to us, which is the voice.
Yeah, because everybody has a voice.
Exactly.
And so, it's kind of that idea of how, nothing is born of thin air, everything comes from something. So, all these instruments have driven so far from the voice, but it all started with just the humanity in mind.
Yeah, that's exactly what where I wanted to get to, because most people don't always realize that the instrument that they're playing, whether it be a piano, a flute, or a violin, that all of it comes from even composition, even music that we write, and that's even more for composition. It all comes from humanity as a person, as feelings, as something very intimate that then becomes something bigger. As you said, as it got bigger, it became its own instrument. But in its roots, it's something that when you play the instrument, do you keep that in mind? Do you keep it in mind as saying, oh, I'm playing an instrument that was born to imitate or accompany, voice?
Like I said, I play the flute as an extension of myself.
Mm-hmm.
So while I'm not actively thinking this instrument was created to imitate and accompany what is naturally just given to most people, I think of it as, this is my voice. It's not just a pretty instrument that I go and it makes sound. It is at the end of the day, it is part of what I'm trying to say.
So it's your form of expression.
Absolutely. Yeah, and in a way it's kind of easier as a wind player, because for flute specifically, we utilize our bodies very similarly to how a singer utilizes theirs when they're singing, when we play the flute, because there is no resistance here like there would be with brass. They have a mouthpiece and they buzz into the mouthpiece. There is this resistance that's keeping everything together, but with flute it's free. So the resistance we create is within ourselves. It's similar to the voice. They have no resistance here. It's all created within themselves. And then same with breathing. We breathe the same way. We use the same amount, same kinds of air. As a singer reaches in their higher register, they open up everywhere so that everything is nice and resonant and relaxed. It's the exact same thing with flute. We open up so that it's all resonant, it all travels, and it's a beautiful sound, much like how vocalists do as they ascend. So the flute is, it's everything that a singer does but sing, as physically.
Yeah, definitely. You love teaching.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to ask you what is the number one thing that you want all your students to bring home with them through, the process of learning from you? The most important thing you want them to achieve or understand about the instrument and their relationship with the instrument.
Are you asking specifically for the instrument?
Yeah, as you as a teacher with the flute.
So, at the end of the day, my goal is for the student to be better than they were yesterday, whether that be as a musician or as a person. And I am not able to define what that means for them. I can just hope that my guidance leads them to that.
So it's almost a form of trust. You give your part, and you hope that by giving your part, they will be better than the day before, as you said.
Yeah, pretty much. Because one thing I tell my students often is I see them once a week. I am their teacher for however long, once a week, and the rest is up to them. What I say, what I show them about the instrument, I can show them. I can show them 30 times. I can tell them why it works the way that it works. But at the end of the day, it's up to them to apply what I show them. And so, while part of my job is to guide, but the other part is to inspire them to want to do better. And so with that does come a level of trust that they will take what I give them and apply it to whatever it needs to be applied to. And then even for my younger students, it's a similar thing. I also teach early music education, and it's a little bit different because they aren't going to remember me. They're going to remember that they had a great experience with music when they were young, and that's something that they're going to take with them. So while they may not be inspired by me as a person, just because they genuinely won't remember, right? Because they're so young. While they may not be inspired by me as a person, they're going to be inspired by those experiences and the memories of just having the ability to make music.
And do you think that as a teacher, you, from now to the very end of your career, current and future career, do you think that you always need to have an answer ready as a teacher, or do you think that you learn from and sometimes you discover also new things that you didn't know about?
No, I think there comes there's a nice level of respect with being honest and saying, I don't have a good answer for your question. I'll get back to you on that, whether that be in the following lesson or even if that's let me check and make sure that I'm correct in what I'm saying, and I'll email you later, or we'll touch base later. So with that that humbleness, comes a level of respect. And that I think has never been challenged on my behalf. So anytime because like I said, I teach young ones, and they ask you the craziest things that are all valid questions, right?
Yeah.
But you never think they ask you things that you would never think it needs to be asked. And so you have
Such as?
So there's always the why in everything that I do. And so one of my students, she, at the end of every lesson, I give her 3 or 4 minutes I will answer any question that she has, because every week is just a plethora of questions that she just picks up. And I'm trying to remember, if I had my notebook, I'd be able to pull them out, because throughout the lesson I have to write them down so I'll remember to answer them. God.
So many questions.
Or, you know what? It'll be stuff like why is the flute structured the way that it is? And in order for me to explain that to her, I have to give her the most condensed version of the history of the flute, because she's not just satisfied with, oh, this is the most convenient way for it to be played. No, she wants to know why. She wants to know exactly why, which is amazing. And I love being able to, because I love the history of the food. I love being able to nerd out about like why the Bohm system came into existence. But I can't be like, oh, it's the Bohm system. Blah, 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 blah. Here's 300 years of history. Blah, 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 and why? Like, I can't do that in her 30-minute
You
long
need to condense it.
And so it's like, in order to condense it, I have to be like, I tell her often, like, you are asking me a question that has too long of an answer for me to give you. But here's the shortest way for me to explain it. I hope this is enough. So I get a lot of those.
You're an amazing teacher.
I do my best.
Oh,
I do
really?
my best. I'm not going to say that I'm perfect and that there's often times where, like, you know, I have to go, there are times where I have to go back on what I say because, like, whether that be I said something incorrect or it's just said something that wasn't fitting to the student. But it's like, you know, it's like any other thing that you do every day. You know, every day is a kind of an experiment when it comes to teaching. And like with any of my students, I don't do the same thing twice. You know, it's always new and it's always evolving.
Kids are crazy.
They are. Oh my God.
Wow.
I love all my students. Trust. But sometimes I'm like, oh my God. I've got a few gray hairs in here.
We've had a couple bad apples.
They're not bad. They're all great. They have their bad days.
Mm.
They do have bad days. And it is hard to have a student when they're having a bad day, not just like because like, you know, they aren't, it's not because they're doing anything wrong, right? It's just like, you know, sometimes when they're a little bit more upset than they usually are. Like I've had a few lessons that have just turned into therapy sessions. Yeah. Which, you know, that's sometimes what they need. And so it's biggest thing I think that separates me from others is I always meet my student with where they're at, not just as a player, but also just where they're at mentally and as a person.
Well, like you said, you want to better them as a person as
Absolutely.
well. I mean,
Absolutely. And, you know, like, and I think that's just a big thing that teachers everywhere do, whether they want to or not. Like, they're going to change their students as people. And they're going, like, every student is going to take a piece of their teacher with them throughout their life.
That's true. That's true. At least for me, it's true. Because ever since I was a teenager and had good or bad teachers, in a way, they all instilled in me a part of them.
Yeah, and it's not even just music teachers,
No,
right? Like,
no.
it can be your
No,
second grade math teacher.
Especially math for me.
Oh, yeah.
And physics.
I find, like, I always had a connection with my math teachers and my literature teachers. I like, which the math part's weird, I think, but, like, I feel like everybody had a connection with their English teacher, though.
yeah.
By literature, you mean English literature teacher?
Literature, yeah.
I did. You?
Yeah.
What about you?
Oh god, yeah. Our English teacher in high school was like the class therapist.
Yeah.
All the girls would go to him and be like, this I'm dating, blah blah blah, and he'd always help them and stuff.
Yeah, like, I find that's usually the trend, is it's the...
I'm just realizing this, though. I'm just realizing.
Weird that they were talking to him about their relationship.
Oh gosh, they were so open. Like it literally was therapy for them.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah, they would go in and just talk about everything, and he would just sit there and just like actually give them like advice and stuff.
Listen.
Yeah.
I'm just realizing this because we also had our experience back in Italy with it was our literature teacher who was also the head of our sector, it was called. So she was basically working relationship between the class and the other teachers also, like a head of department in some way. And she was responsible also for our well-being, mental well-being in a way. So she would sit down with us.
When you say responsible for your mental well-being, was that like a genuine responsibility on her behalf, or was that a responsibility that was kind of instilled upon her as a teacher?
Love that question. So I don't know exactly the answer to that because I had more than one, and each and every one of them took their responsibility in a different way. But from my perspective, I think it wasn't as a requirement in their job description.
Okay.
But I think that it came with the job in a way, because if you are teaching like 11, 12, 13-year-olds and, you just have as you said, a plethora of questions. In this case, it was a plethora of emotions all the time.
Oh boy.
People crying, or people having hard time. People, if they couldn't do their homework, some of us would also be cry in the class. And she would be able to sit down with us in a singular way and listen to us. And she also had the luxury, I don't know if it's also here in America, to also speak with the parent one-on-one.
That usually happened if the kid was bad.
Only?
Depends on the teacher.
Oh.
It usually, sadly, teachers will only speak with parents outside of parent-teacher conferences as a negative thing, as a last, not necessarily last resort, but you've tried giving them verbal warnings, written warnings, sending them to the office, and now you're looking to parents for help, to help have their child behave. But there are a lot of teachers who will do the uncomfortable and say, hey, I noticed that this student is not, participating like they usually do, or maybe they're not as engaged, whether it be with the lesson plan or maybe with their peers as they usually are. Just want to make sure everything's going okay. Making sure everything's going okay at home. So there are plenty of teachers that do that, but I find it's not as often as it should.
Well, don't get me wrong. It was, at least for me, middle school and high school was a very toxic environment, not only musically, but academically in general, because teachers, there would be the really, really good teachers that would really go the extra mile for you, and would keep constant contact with the parent because that would be required. There was literally a platform for teachers and parents. But the other complete opposite was teachers would humiliate you in front of everybody, especially in this case in the musical Rome. If you couldn't do something, they would make you feel even worse about it. And I think that this complete opposites of hot and cold would then instill in me, but also in other students, the fact that we're not able to, as you told me at the beginning, you have to do things for yourself, not because they're going to tell you that it's never going to be enough. You said something like that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that this inability of doing that comes from the fact that I've either had a couple of teachers who really cared, but at the same time I've had as many teachers who really were working hard to make it difficult because they didn't have the opportunities we had, and maybe they didn't think it was fair for us. I don't know. And I think you as a teacher, you as a now teacher and future teacher, I think that what you're doing, this is the reason why I asked you these questions previously, because what you are telling me with your answers is that if all teachers were open-minded as you are, as in the musical industry, but not only, it would change the world, honestly. I think.
No, absolutely. And I think part of that kind of, I guess, closed-mindedness comes with just how teachers are treated. Teachers are treated like babysitters in some cases. They're treated as babysitters. They're treated as less than, on TikTok, I see a lot of story times from other teachers, and because apparently teacher talk is a thing and I'm on it. But one thing that I've seen is there's this one lady who would take stories both from her and then from other friends who are teachers, or just other teachers, stories that she had heard. And there was one where it was a story of a teacher. She got pregnant, but the administration had set a rule where if you were going to get pregnant, you had to do it so that the due date was during the summer, so that it wouldn't impede with the children's education.
What?
Excuse me?
What the heck?
Is that even constitutional?
They didn't specify what school it was, where it was, or anything like that. But that was a thing a teacher had experienced.
Did she get fired?
She just quit. She quit because that wasn't the first time that they had done some mistreatment. or at least to my understanding, the way that the story was laid out. You know, of course, nobody ever has the full details with that sort of thing, but that was what was presented, right? And it's like, it's disgusting, because you also get like the parents who are like, why is my kid failing? And they always will listen to what the student has to say, which a lot of times is valid. You know, there are malicious teachers. There are teachers who use their position of power in a way to be abusive because it makes them, unfortunately, feel better about themselves for whatever sick and twisted reason. But, you know, it goes both ways, but teachers are genuinely abused and they don't get any financial compensation. Most things that in public school teaching, most things that teachers have come out of their own already very low salary. All of the decorations in their classroom comes out of their pockets. Any sort of like treats or like fun days that they do for their students comes directly out of their pockets. And it's like, there only more and more is expected of them, but anytime there's any sort of like budget adjustment, some educational branch is the first to get cut. When it comes to federal funding, it's always education that gets cut. When it comes to state funding, it's always education that gets cut. And then when it comes to countywide funding, it's always music and arts that gets cut. And then it goes into the other arts, and then it goes into your sciences, and then it goes into your maths, and it's never going to be like the athletics that gets cut. It's always the teachers, and it's always the arts that gets cut. And so like these teachers are abused. And so I understand to an extent why some teachers, they don't go the extra mile, because mentally they can't. Just like how we're people first before we're musicians, teachers are people before they're teachers. And there has to be a level of like respect for yourself and being able to care for yourself. Because if you can't care for yourself outside of the classroom, you can't care for your students in the classroom. If you can't care for your students in the classroom, you can't care for them outside of the classroom. And so really there has to be a type of reform for teachers so that the abuse is lessened and they're financially compensated for all of the work that goes into what they do.
And this is why she's running for president. No, jokes aside.
No, teaching here in the U.S. is definitely...
It's horrible, and I'm so fortunate to be a freelance teacher. I, like, for my private lessons, I do mostly work directly with the parents, but they have an understanding that, like, I'm not their babysitter. I can cut them out. So like, just like they can be like, what's wrong with you? Why is my kid doing this, that, and the other? And I can be like, I'm not going to handle that treatment. You may leave. It was wonderful.
Did you ever have to do that?
I have never had to cut out a parent or a student due to, I've never had to do that due to any sort of like misbehaving on, whether it be the student, whether it be the parent being any sort of abusive or anything like that. Never had to deal with that. I have had to cut a student out because they would not play in the lesson or outside of the lesson. So I did have to cut a student that way.
How do you find the strength in having some important talks sometimes with parents, or sometimes even harder, I think, it comes also with the student?
You know, well, with this student, it was honestly a mutual understanding, me, the student, and the parent, that the student just didn't want to do the flute anymore. And I am not going to force somebody to play music, because when you force somebody to play music, when you force somebody to do an art, they're going to have resentment and they're going to grow to hate it. And I can't force myself to allow somebody to have a hatred for music. And so if that means they don't play the flute anymore, that's okay. As long as they can still grow, one day they may say, I am mentally capable and physically capable to play this instrument again, and give it another try later down the road. But I don't want to put a stop to that journey just because I feel like that's more selfish.
You don't want to give it a bad
name. Exactly. Yeah. I don't want to give it a bad name. I at no point ever want to do that to a student for any instrument or any musical thing. But you know, I've had outside of that student, I've had a few talks with another couple of students just throughout my years of teaching, just saying, hey, I noticed like the first time I do it, it's usually hey, I noticed that these past few weeks, like, you haven't been as prepared as you usually are. I'm just making sure, like, am I doing something? Am I giving you too much work? Am I doing something that's making you feel overwhelmed? Because I want to always meet the student where they're at. And then if it continues and it's very much like, I've given you less work, I've tried giving you more supplemental material, this, that, and the other, then it turns into, hey, this is starting to become a problem. I'm just letting you know, like, my expectations are a little bit higher, and I want you to succeed in your goals, whatever they may be, which is something we discuss of our very first lesson. And then if it becomes a problem, then I will communicate it with the parents, say, hey, your student, like, you've always been so phenomenal, like, the student's always been great, but here recently it's been like letting down a little bit. I just want to make sure everything's cool. And then the last resort is hey, listen, this is the last time we're going to have this conversation. If it doesn't improve over the next couple of weeks, we may not be able to work together anymore.
Well, that is very professional, though.
Wow.
And I am always very straightforward with my students, no matter how old they are. Like the one that I had to cut, he was 8. I was very straightforward with him and his mom. It was very much like, this is where I'm at. Let's find a way to meet up in the middle. If not, then I think it'll be best for us to go our separate ways. But yeah, I'm always very straightforward with the student, because, like, even when they're young, they're tiny humans. They know what I'm saying to them, and they understand, like, even when they're that young, they have a little bit of responsibility when it comes to an instrument. And I'm only their teacher once a week. There's only so much I can do.
That just explains how much I think you are an amazing teacher, actually. I'm serious.
You're
no.
making me blush. Like, it's
No,
not just the sunburn
I'm not
anymore.
saying it. I'm not saying yours to make you blush. I'm just saying it because I think that I've never heard a teacher say that, and you are a teacher, so I've never heard a teacher say that wherever they are at in their, in their career. I've never heard a teacher say that. I've had wonderful teachers. Mary can attest that care, that show that they care. They ask if you are okay. Yes, but I've never heard this, this explanation of
Straightforwardness.
Straightforwardness, because I or Mary have experienced the straightforwardness in a good constructive, right? It says constructive way, but we've never heard it explained from the perspective of the mentor, of the teacher, and that's why I think it's amazing.
It's a good conversation to have, just because, like, as somebody who's both a teacher and a student, I see it from both lights, and so I know what my expectations are from a teacher, and I also know what my expectations are as a teacher, and so knowing all, like, having both perspectives is very helpful for me, as well as just, I've been teaching for a long time. Like, I know I'm only 24, but I've been teaching private lessons, like, as a job for 6 years. So, like, since I was in college, and then even before that, like, I was like a tutor for the flute. And even in high school, even in high school, I taught guitar to young kids too. That was another thing that I did. I didn't do it for very long, but I had a few guitar students when I was in high school. But, like, so I've been teaching for a long time, so I have a lot of experience, and so, like, there's still a lot for me to learn, but these are just the things that have worked well for me so far,
That's amazing.
That is amazing. Wow.
Do y'all teach? Do y'all want
Did you ever
to
had
teach?
the chance to?
No, I have not.
Well, what we have done together, though, was in this past year, was Jeremy had composed a piece that was going to then be played, and I remember it was 2 violins.
Is this for Edgar?
Yeah, it was the Edgar piece. It was
Yeah.
2 violins, a viola, was it a cello or a guitar,
It
double
was,
bass,
guitar, double bass,
and piano.
Yes.
It was really good setting for the instruments. The sound was really good, and I remember that was a wonderful experience because he got to explain to us as a composer what you can explain it. It would like you got the chance to explain to us what you actually wrote, but from first hand.
Yeah. At least try to.
We did pretty good.
No, rehearsing. Oh, doing rehearsals as the composer is probably one of the most stressful things.
Really? Why?
Oh God, yeah. Because the problem is like you're so used to listening to it through MIDI, so your expectations, personally, mine are like you know when the dynamics should be played and stuff. You know the bare bones of it, but when it comes to like the sound quality, at least for me, it's like my standards are pretty low. So like oftentimes the performers are always like, you know, should I do this? Do you like me playing it this way? And I'm always like, yes, because it always sounds so good in person, you know. But that comes off as me being like not what's the word?
Not as specific as we
pushover.
wanted. Yeah. Not pushover, but we used to ask him. I remember because he would say yes. As he said, he would say yes to anything. Do you want it this way or this way? And he was like, yes. I like them both. I'm like, but you have to give us something, right? So,
I chose.
But then, as I said, after like the third, fourth rehearsal, it worked, and he learned how to have his own voice as a composer. But it was difficult because he had so many questions coming from everywhere. So in a certain way, it was like a little masterclass.
Yeah. So
I mean, yeah, you could treat it like a coaching situation.
yeah.
That's why I was connecting it to.
So it takes guts. It really does, especially to like be that straightforward with everybody. So, like you said there's like a courage to it, being able to be that straightforward. Some teachers can't, you know, because they're dealing with a lot on their own, anyways.
And they can't deal with it, yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, you know, it's also like how you say it. You know, like I'm not just gonna be like, you need to practice.
Which is what I hear at least.
It's usually a like I said, like I noticed that you haven't been playing the same way like you usually do. Are you practicing like this much? Are you like doing these things that you used to do, you know? And so some of it comes from knowing.
yeah, and that takes so much like maturity, I think too.
Maturity as in like just being able to say it kindly.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of teachers, you know, their first instinct when, I'm assuming, as a teacher, like when you see a student isn't practicing, you're like, okay, what are you doing with your, you know, like, come on.
Let me tell you something. This is the nicest way to ask kind of a disrespectful question, right? When my student has not practiced, and if any of my students are watching this, please cut the video off. My undergrad professor told me this, and every time she asked me, I was so self-conscious, but anytime my student is playing something just bad, it's just not good, like you can tell that they did not practice, I will ask, tell me how you practiced this week.
And
Like
that's where the bullshit starts flying.
And, well, it's not even just that, you know, they'll either tell you I didn't practice it, or they will explain to you how they did practice it, and then you can say, okay, maybe this isn't the best practice technique, here's how we can refine this. Which I had to do yesterday with one of my students. She told me that this whole chunk of music, she was just playing it. Like that's how she practiced it. She just started at the beginning of this chunk and ended at the end of this chunk, and it was like a solid 8 measures. It's a Telemon fantasy, like it's a lot of music happening. And I was like, that's probably not the best because that's a lot of information. I'm sorry, I keep hitting the mic, but there's like a lot of information in this chunk, and just repping it is only going to reinforce the mistakes. So here's how we can refine this. This is a fine technique for your, you know, the level that you're at. let's do a little less. And then I showed her some other ways to approach it that was similar to what she was doing, but made a little bit more sense.
There's this famous saying that says repetition makes perfect, but it's how you repeat it
No,
that makes sense.
It, you know, if you do a perfect repetition.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. If you take the same cell and you work on it until you achieve what you want, and then you repeat it with the same intention enough times to then go over it while playing then the whole thing, that's when you achieved something. And sometimes, fun fact, sometimes you won't see it happening immediately, but while you're not studying it, it's still happening in your head. I've had this amazing teacher, Bogdanovich, who taught me just a couple of weeks only. It was a festival in Italy, and I had this amazing opportunity to hear him telling me, you're doing it right, but you need more time, and you can achieve this by not playing. And I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, and the only way I thought I could achieve something on the instrument is by actually doing it. But then he said, you're doing it correct 8 times in a row, which was what we established. Now you put down the instrument, go eat ice cream with your mom, because I was younger, so my mom would be there with me. It was in a completely different, it was in the south of Italy. We lived at north. And the next day, I took it up and I played the whole thing, not just those 8 bars, and it just worked. Mm-hmm. Whereas when I did it the 9th time instead of the 8th time, yes, the day before, it didn't work anymore, because I would burn out. So I think it's also it's also very mental. It's also important practicing. It's important to give yourself time and space to also say, you know what, I did my part today. I'm going to put down the instrument. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to go read, do homework, do anything else. Then later or tomorrow, I will start from a better place. And that might be improvement. Like 95% of the time, it is improvement.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing, right? Is to say, I've done all I can. I'm gonna put this away for a minute.
Oh, that's so hard.
That's hard, and I think that's not the same in other fields. I know that in my literature classes, when we would do writing and stuff, they would say, if you reach any sort of writing block, just write things. It can be about anything. You could write, oh, the sky looks like blah, blah, blah right now. There's a bird outside chirping away, blah, 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 blah. I had this for dinner. And eventually you'll make your way back. But it's that's not how it works with music. You have to take a step away. Do you find that with composition? Do you find it better to take a step away or to just go nuts and just start writing stuff?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm a lost cause when it comes to composition.
No, you're not.
No, because the only times I do compose is out of spurts of motivation.
And that's valid.
Yeah, but when I force myself to with the arrangements I had to do for Flex, I feel with some of the pieces you could tell where the rush was.
Flex is an orchestra.
Oh yeah, it's an orchestra. But yeah, I would say those are the examples of me just sitting down and just writing, forcing myself to write. Whereas I feel if I had more time, I feel I would have been able to, do my own creative spins on stuff. But because of that limited amount of time, I had to just, it was a lot of doubling. I feel very conflicted because it's not performance at all. I would say it's more like writing. It is right.
Yeah, that's why I asked, just because music and writing, I feel are very similar in the way that you have it's equated to each other often. You have periods, you have sentences, you have question and answer, you have echo response, all that type of thing. So they do go hand in hand. And so I was just wondering if, as a composer, it makes more sense for you to just write away, like no matter where you are in the writing process, or if it makes sense for you to say, I'm gonna take a second away from this one.
Yeah, totally. No, what we're taught in as composers is to do that. Is to literally, like, if you sense yourself being burnt out, just write bullshit. It doesn't have to be good. You don't have to worry about it being tonal. Don't even worry about it being atonal. Just write anything. It could be a scale with a chord. Anything. Um, and that's what I struggle with is having that consistency. But I think with writing, you do have to have a level of consistency, but also you do have to, like you said, give yourself time when you do get completely burnt out. As with all things, it's like a balance. Yeah, no, it's because it's not like, because I feel like with performance, when you repeat things, like, it kind of turns into like muscle memory in a way. It's going over and over.
Yeah.
You don't really have that in composing. You just kind of write.
Would you ever try to like do that kind of like daily journaling exercise, but for music?
I definitely should.
I wonder like how that would work. I'm not a composer. I've written a few things that I thought was neat when I was a little younger, but nothing like I would not try to perform it. I wouldn't try to ask anybody to perform those works. And so I'm just wondering if like tackling it similarly to writing, doing the daily journaling or even like a weekly journaling, if that would be like, if that would change your perspective on like, I only write when I'm motivated to write.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it would. It definitely would make the difference, but just been burnt out on my end with that kind of stuff.
How do you guys handle burnout?
Personally, I have most of my burnouts or stress or anything gets mostly related to food. So I have periods where I am very skinny and periods where I am less skinny, which creates this really bad toxic rabbit hole with food. But the thing that gets me out of it is a lot of like working out usually, or getting some fresh air, even walking. But as all things, it requires consistency, and being burnt out is not something that is correlated to consistency. So therefore, even the solution to being burnt out isn't consistent. It might seem stupid, but it sounded correct in my head.
No, it's okay. I think I know what you're saying.
But yeah, in a way, it's also the people that you decide to talk to and that you decide to have around you in that moment. Because if I know that I can be a very pessimistic person in that moment, I know I'm not going to go around people who I believe have a tendency of being pessimistic, because I just am going to go down that rabbit hole, as I said. But if I can confide in friends, and know that they are going to listen and know that they might give me actually some good advice, then that is also another form of cure that I find very helpful, is the people that you choose around yourself. Because you're responsible for any type of thing that you have around you.
Absolutely.
From being burnt out to how to cure it to who to have around. So yeah, that's my answer. What about you?
Yeah, similar. I mean, for me, I embrace nature. I just go on hikes and whatnot. And, get fresh air. That's what I do. Basically, I like, try to do everything but music. Just because the thought is what just stresses you out. In the moment.
What do you mean, do anything but music? Like, as in, like, you won't practice, you won't, like, write, or you won't even listen?
Oh gosh, yeah, mainly writing. For me, writing. I feel like for you, probably not performing.
Practicing.
Practicing. So just staying clear of that, but definitely not like stray away from music. No, I think when I'm burnt out is the time when I listen to music the most. And I honestly, that's probably what gets me through burnouts, is that, you'll as a composer, you know, you look towards other places for creativity and stuff, and inspirations. And for me personally, I find it when I listen to music or when I watch a really good movie, stuff like that. It's kind of what it reminds you of, like, why you're here in the first place, why you're pursuing music, and that's kind of what lifts me out of a burnout is just motivation, really. As a teacher, do you ever find yourself like getting burnt out when it comes to teaching?
Not usually. Like I said, I'm very fortunate in the way I am teaching. I am a freelance teacher, so like I decide pretty much everything. With that, I'm almost always doing what I love. And so like I don't necessarily get burnt out. I just get bone tired.
Yeah.
Because there's so much that goes into it. But there are the occasional classes that I dread to go to, the classes that I dread to teach, and the way that I hate saying that, right? I truly hate saying that, but like not everything can be a perfect 100% of the time, and I have one specific class that is just horrible every single week. We've had like 3 good weeks, and I've been working with them for almost a year now, and it's unfortunate because it's not part of it's that age group. They're kindergartners and they just want to not sit down and they just don't care about anything else, and also part of it is they're COVID babies, and so they have different life experiences already, and with that it gets a little bit tricky trying to grasp how to handle that, right? And so that's just a different experience that I have to overcome, and it's coming to an end. So I have that to look forward to. But with teaching, I don't get burnt out too often. I just get tired because it's a lot of work, and I love every minute of it. But like there are times where I'm just like, man, if I could have like just a 3-day weekend, because I teach Monday through Saturday. And so it's like, if I could have a 3-day weekend, as of right now, I get 1 day off a week. Usually. Today's a little bit different because I had a performance this morning and rehearsals throughout the day. But usually I try to keep my Sundays as my day. But yeah, so teaching, no. I'm very fortunate in being able to do what I love 99% of the time.
I think that's something we have to remind ourselves. We're doing what we love.
I mean, it's not even, even doing what you love, you're going to get tired.
Of course.
Like I know for me, when I would get burnt out with my instrument, one thing that I would do is typically when I get burnt out, I avoid whatever it is. So like with school, I would just I'd procrastinate doing my homework, or I just wouldn't do it. Or I'd, skip class, just as like a mental health thing. And which, that's not the best response. And so with flute playing, when I would get tired, is I would just play a piece that I love, that no matter what, it's always going to be a good time. Like I don't go into it with an expectation of playing it perfectly. I go into it with the expectation that this is just food for my soul and not for anybody else.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
We should write a book about you.
Stop! Oh my god! Every
I would
time
make
I say
so much
something-
money.
Every time I say something, you're like, oh.
No, I mean, girl, it makes sense. It resonates. Okay, it resonates. All right, hear me out. We're getting close to the end.
Yes.
What we do here usually is we ask the person we interview to leave a question for the next person without knowing who they are, and answer the question from the previous person. But there's a twist today. There's a twist because the previous person that was before you didn't leave the question.
Okay.
So I know she's here today. So I'm going to ask Grace to come here in the camera if you want.
Which this or this?
This one. Come close to the mic and leave her a question.
I'm suddenly very nervous. ASMR.
All right, leave her a question so that she can answer at the end.
My question is, how do you deal with stress?
How I handle stress, like I said, I tend to be a little bit avoidant, which isn't the best. And it's something that I've been trying to overcome. And so just some ways that I do that is I try to always allow time for myself. No matter what, I don't care how busy my day is. It was something that I've said several times throughout today is we're a person first. And so if that means if that has meant being a little bit late for a class, if that has meant sleeping in a few extra minutes, going to bed early, or just putting aside an hour of my time at some point throughout the day for me, just to read, hang out with my cat, have a conversation with a friend, something that is going to be nourishing to me intellectually, spiritually, physically, whatever it is that I particularly need in that moment. That's what I'm trying to gravitate toward.
Okay. All right, thank you for the question.
Look out.
So, all right, now we got the chain back. Okay.
How can we, as musicians, better the musical world for the next generation?
It's very music teacher.
Very music teacher.
Oh my God.
That's a good thing.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
For having me.